Do you avoid making complicated desserts or fancy desserts because you're afraid they're going to be too complicated? This is the recipe for you because, of course, nobody wants to make an overly, recipe that takes all kinds of time and requires all kinds of equipment. But this is a vegan pineapple upside down cake. And look how stunning that is. Is that not beautiful? Oh, I just love the look of it. And guess what? It's made with minimal ingredients. I think probably most of the things that you would have in your cabinet right now. And it's also made without any equipment except for, a few bowls and a spoon. We won't even need a mixer for this one. That's how easy this cake is. And it's also delicious. Can you imagine that this caramelized topping with pineapples and maraschino cherries and just a fluffy, moist cake on the inside? Oh, it's delicious. So I'm also going to be sharing with you some of my favorite magical kitchen tips that I think makes this cake so easy to make and perfect every time. So I'm so excited. Let's get to making it. Where can I find room to put this there? Okay. We start with making that caramelized topping, and that begins with 4 tablespoons of vegan butter. I like using this kind of pie pan. It's so easy because I can just pop it in the microwave, which is exactly what I'm going to do. This is going to go in the microwave for about 20 seconds to melt that vegan butter. And I just like the look. Obviously you can see the shape of the cake, but you can always use a 9-inch cake pan. That works just fine as well. But I do love the kind of shape that you can get out of a pie pan like that. It's just beautiful. So now that our vegan butter is melted, what I like to do is just kind of spread it around the pan a little bit. And then we're going to sprinkle it with 1/2 cup of brown sugar. I like using light brown sugar here. Just sprinkle it over the top. You don't have to be super careful about this because you can always, if you're worried you've got it spread around, unevenly, we can fix that when it's all done. This is your caramelized topping. Just try to make sure you get the sugar around. Perfect. Okay. And then you're gonna need a 20-ounce can of pineapple rings. That's basically what we've got here. And what I do is I like to sit it on the pan with a paper towel to kind of absorb some of the extra liquid. And you're going to also want a kitchen towel because even though it's set out for a few minutes, they're still very moist. So what I like to do is kind of press them in between, in between your hands with the towel. The first one is going to go right in the center, and the other ones are going to go right next to it. I like to do the pineapples first because, the maraschino cherries can definitely color your hands, and I just like to keep the color separate. Let me show you here in a second. Just going to keep going with this. Like I say, a gentle press to remove, blot off any of that extra moisture. And you do have to kind of do some creative squeezing to get those all the pineapples in exactly the way they need to be. How's that? That looks pretty good, don't you think? And then we've got just a few left. We've got 3, in fact, and we're going to cut these in half because we're going to use every single pineapple in this can. I'm telling you that. Okay. Now these, what I like to do is put them upside down. Let's see, I think we put those in between. So where you see the 2 pineapples, we'll put this right in the middle. Like I say, that way we use every single pineapple that we've got. Perfect. Look at that. That's beautiful. Now I'm going to get this pan out of the way, and we're going to move to these maraschino cherries. Now here I'm going to get a paper towel because even though I have let these kind of sit in this bowl, there's still a lot of moisture. Watch when I just squeeze it between my hand, you're going to see we get some moisture. So we're going to put one of these in each of the pineapple centers. Gonna go just like that. You can give it a little tuck to get it in there just right. Gonna keep going. Jennifer Ray says, hello from Scotland. Hi, Jennifer. I'm so glad to see you. I wish I could learn how to speak in a Scottish accent so I could say, you know, I know in Ireland, what do they say? Top of the morning. What do they say in Scotland? Do they have some kind of saying like that? Okay, so I like to add cherries just, you know, wherever you want to. I find the more the merrier, but you know, you could just stick to the major centers of the pineapple, but I like to add just a few more. So let's just do a few more. Monique says, hello from Canada. Hi, Monique. Oh, she says, hi, everyone. Looks yummy. Yes, I totally agree. It does. I'm so glad to hear you say that. I'm glad I'm not the only one that just looks at this cake and says, yeah, that is yummy. Oh, your mom used to make this cake. That is wonderful. I love recipes like that that just really bring back wonderful memories. And you know, yeah, oh, it's just so special. It feels like sometimes I feel like when I'm making a recipe that my mom would make, that I'm right back in the kitchen with her. So I hope you feel that same way too. That's nice. Okay, so this is it. Now, what I would typically do with this is this would go in the fridge while I make the cake batter, but today we're just going to let it sit aside. But yes, in the fridge, just you know, it's going to sit there for like 10 minutes as we're making the cake batter. So let's go on to the cake batter. I'm going to move this out of the way. So the cake batter begins with 1 3/4 cups of all-purpose flour. And you could obviously use something like a whole wheat flour, but I really like, I don't know, I like this cake being light and fluffy. And so I always just use all-purpose. And to this, I'm going to add a tablespoon of cornstarch. Of course, it's not going to come out of the bowl. I have a 1/2 teaspoon of salt just to give it some extra flavor. And here is part of my trick. I use a 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda and a teaspoon of baking powder. That way we get lots of lift in this cake, but not too much of that. I think the baking soda flavor is just a little too strong. So I'm going to put that in. And we're going to give this a stir just to make sure that we've got the baking soda, you know, just spread throughout this flour. As I've said before, you don't want to have somebody get a bite that has more baking soda in it than anything else. So that's not good. Okay, we're going to set that aside. Now we're going to move on to the moist mixture, and it begins with 1/3 cup of vegetable oil. I'm going to pour this in here. I kind of got it. I filled it up a little too much. A little tricky to balance that. And I'm going to add to that 1 cup of granulated sugar. And to that, I'm going to add 1/2 cup of water. And this is what I consider one of my star ingredients, which is 1/4 cup of, you could use vegan sour cream, or this is basically a vegan yogurt. In fact, this is Siggy's, but you can also use Forager, just a plain yogurt. You don't want to use a sweetened yogurt for this. And then another one of my favorite magical ingredients is a little bit of apple cider vinegar. And in fact, I'm gonna pour in here a tablespoon. I like adding this because I know it seems kind of questionable. Why would I add vinegar to a cake? But believe it or not, cakes have many different flavors in them. And if you're used to a cake that maybe you made it with milk, believe it or not, milk has kind of a sour taste to it. And if you have it, you may not recognize that because you've had milk your whole life. That's at least how I felt. And when you go away from milk and then you have it again, you realize how sour it is. So adding a little bit of vinegar gives it the complexity of flavor that you're used to from growing up, you know, making traditional cakes. So anyway, this is what we're going to do. We're going to stir this together. I'm going to give it a rough stir, and then I'm going to switch over to using a whisk because that's going to help kind of break up some of those little bits, make it a little bit more homogeneous. Add that. Perfect. Now this is going to go in here. Same thing. We're going to do the same process. I'm going to pour this in here, and then I'm going to stir it gently, and then I'm going to add, I'm going to use the whisk. And I am going to get my spatula to get all the goodness out of that bowl. So many ingredients can be left behind if you don't do that. I think a spatula is one of my favorite kitchen gadgets. I don't know about you all, but that's how I feel. Susie says, I tuned in a little late. That's okay, Susie. We'll get you caught up here. I'm so glad that you've joined us. And James says, so colorful. Yes, this is a very colorful dessert. I totally agree. And you know what? It's fun to show up if you're taking a cake to a party. It's fun to show up with a cake that's got a little bit of color to it. I totally agree. Okay, I'm gonna switch over to the whisk here. What I like to do is use a spatula to kind of give it a nice stir, but then I find the whisk really takes care of those large clumps of flour, which we don't want to have in our cake batter. You don't want to overmix it, but you can give it a good stir here and it's going to be fine. See how that we've broken up all those big, large clumps of flour. There might be a few little ones, but that's okay. Now I got to get all that batter out of there. Tap, tap. Okay. Here comes the fun. Now we're going to be pouring this onto our beautiful presentation here of pineapples and maraschino cherries. So here we go. Look at that. Isn't that beautiful? I just think that looks delicious. I have the oven preheated to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. And this cake is going to bake for 45 minutes. I know that seems like a long time, but I think it really helps because it's a super moist cake, and this really helps it to leave you areas of moisture, but also make sure that you get it done. You don't want the cake to be soggy for sure. Okay, I'm going to give it a little swirl here to make sure we get it all around. And that's going to go in the oven. Here we go. I'm going to set the timer. What did I say? 45 minutes? Perfect. 45 minutes. That's it. That cake will bake for 45 minutes. And then when it comes out of the oven, set another timer for 15 minutes. And what I like to do is just don't touch it for 15 minutes. I put it on a wire rack to let it cool. And then I run a knife around the edge because believe it or not, sometimes the cake part will stick to the pan. So just run a knife around it and then put a plate and then flip it over. And this is what you're gonna hear, that thump. And that's when you know that your cake has fallen onto the plate. It's a lovely sound. And that's what you're gonna be left with, this beautiful cake that's so delicious and ready to eat. So let's see if we have any more comments. That looks so good. Jennifer says, I totally agree with you. Monique says, when is tea time? Yes, I totally get it. So I imagine you might have a few questions. So for example, can I make this cake gluten-free? Absolutely. Just I always say use a high quality gluten-free baking flour, like gluten-free flours come in different varieties, and make sure you use one that's formulated for baking, which is usually will have a 1-to-1 ratio on it. That's really important. Let's see, another question you might ask is, can you make this ahead? Absolutely. In fact, I think making this, the day before you're going to take it somewhere and just keep it tightly wrapped and in the fridge is going to be amazing today and tomorrow. So yeah, this is a great recipe to make the day before. Some people might want to know, can you use fresh pineapple? And I totally agree that fresh pineapple is a great idea. I like using the cans because, believe it or not, it comes with the perfect amount of pineapple slices. But if you want to use fresh, it's obviously you're going to get some wonderful flavor. I have a video on how to cut a fresh pineapple, so be sure to check that out. And yes, you know what, I've been smelling this cake bake and it's amazing. So I'm so ready for the taste test. I hope you are too. What did I do with my knife? Here we go. Let's just cut right into this.
Storage.
Somebody asked the question about storing the cake. Yes, it's easy to store this cake. I definitely I would not leave it sitting out because it is so moist. I would refrigerate it and then, microwave your slices. Look at that. Look how beautiful that cake is. Comes out. I'm going to show you the inside of this too. Look at that. Oh, that one got away. Gonna have to have that one. It's a beautiful cake. Okay. I'm gonna just oh, I could just tell already just how amazing this is because the way that my fork just went into there and I could just feel the moistness in the cake. Oh, it's amazing. That's so good. This cake is perfect. I'm sorry, that's just how I feel about it because it's got the perfect crumb. Oh, the caramelized pineapple on top with a little hint of the maraschino cherry. Wow, that is so good. This may be my favorite cake ever. And I know that I've made this cake before and I have said this, but every time I make it, I'm reminded again how much I love this cake. It's delicious, perfect, wonderful. It's ready to share at a party or just make it for yourself. That's fine too. So, yeah, leave a comment. I want to hear from you. Have you tried making a pineapple upside down cake before? How's it gone for you? I just want to hear from you. Also, I would think, if you had ideas for creative toppings instead of the cherries, I mean, I can imagine all kinds of things you could put in there, maybe a raspberry or blueberries or whatever. So I would love to hear from you how some creative ingredients that you've used in your pineapple upside down cake. Well, I don't know about you, but this has been so much fun. I have really enjoyed it. And I think if you liked today's video, I would love it if you would give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more recipes coming your way every week.